name is Heather Hagopian, and I am a health and physical education teacher at the Hempfield School District. I teach at Rohrstown Elementary School, which is a K through 6 school, and also at the high school where I teach juniors and seniors. I teach a cardio conditioning class first period. My topic is sensory processing, and I am looking forward to sharing knowledge that I obtained from my research, and I hope that you are able to gain some insight as well. So let's start by discussing what sensory processing is exactly. Sensory processing basically is a person's way of noticing and responding to sensory events that occur in everyday life. Sensory processing affects how people respond in situations. Let's discuss some sensory processing challenges that our students face, or maybe you might know someone yourself, or maybe even yourself, you might have some sensory issues. Sensory processing challenges occur as we interpret sensory information either externally from our environment or internally from our bodies. And these are basically interpreted through our senses. That's the input. And in the next slide, you're going to see we will watch a video on the senses. But first, I have a critical thinking activity challenge, which we will see on the next slide. Critical thinking activity. How many senses do we really have? I want you to think about this, and I want you to watch the video, learn, and then answer the question. Enjoy the video. I hope that you enjoyed that video and gained some knowledge, and hopefully you were able to answer my question. How many senses do we really have? And the correct answer is 7. We will learn about them on the next slide. So, as the quick video clip showed you, there are seven senses and systems. Most of us think of five, the five basics: sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. But there are also two others, which are body awareness and movement, which are the proprioceptive system and the vestibular system. And you can see these seven senses and systems listed here below, along with the little drawing there at the bottom. So again, there are seven systems and senses, not five like we were taught as young kids and as we often think. But these seven senses are very important in the sensory world and may affect how children and people alike process information, process the input. I'd like to talk now about sensory processing and autism spectrum disorder, ASD. Depending on the child's sensory system, they can either under-respond or over-respond to different sensory inputs. It is known that people with ASD typically have more intense reactions to sensory input, and many of you may notice this in your classrooms. I know that I notice it in my gym, which is my classroom, and I need to be sensitive to that when playing music or there's lots of yelling or screaming. Also, children with Asperger's syndrome tend to be significantly more sensitive to certain types of sensory input. Sensory integration. So sensory integration is a way to help students organize their sensory systems so that they can engage in everyday activities productively. The sensory integration theory was proposed and first organized by A. Jean Ayres in 1970, and she worked throughout the 1970s to study and help students with learning disabilities and processing disabilities. And she did this basically in an occupational therapy way, and eventually her studies helped to explain how the integration between the brain and the sensory system could explain learning difficulties. So in the next video you're going to see, it basically provides insight to what a sensory processing disorder is and how therapy can be used to help these children better understand and process the world around them.
You with the sad eyes, don't be discouraged. Oh, I realize it's hard to take courage in a world full of people. You can lose sight of it all in darkness, still inside you make you feel so small. But I see your true colors shining through. I see your true colors, and that's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them show your true colors. True colors are beautiful like a rainbow. Show me a smile then. Don't be unhappy, can't remember when I last saw you laughing. If this world makes you crazy and you've taken all you can bear, you call me up because you know I'll be there. And I see your true colors shining through. I see your true know I'll be there and see your true colors shining, see you shining through your true colors, and that's why I love. Don't be afraid to let them show your true colors. True colors, see your true colors shining through. I see your true colors, and that's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them show your true colors. True colors, true colors are beautiful like a rainbow.
Strategies for students seeking sensory input. So students seeking pattern need more sensory input built into their day. So how can we help these students who need that sensory input and a little extra help so that they can be functional during their day? So here are some strategies for teachers, for parents, if you're an aunt or an uncle, or maybe yourself you have some sensory processing disorders. Here are some things that can help. Chewing or crunchy snacks help. Change positions while working or changing the environment. Textured blankets, mats, and materials. Introducing them to bright colors and contrasts, so especially in your classroom, having brightly colored posters or working tools. Singing and humming, which I know might be a distraction to some, but this actually will help that student struggling. Longer routes to destinations, so if they're moving from class to class, maybe allow them to take a different route to get there. And also scented markers and lip balms will also help build more sensory input into the day of the child struggling with sensory seeking input. So next we're going to talk about things to avoid for those kids who require less sensory input. So the next slide talks about strategies for students with avoiding patterns, so less sensory input. So you want to keep these students away from vents or fans. You want to keep them out of crowded spaces. Try to use unscented materials. Build in some alone time for breaks. This could be like a sensory room or a place that they can go that's just theirs, maybe even under a desk or under a blanket, just a place where they can go and be alone and not be distracted. If possible, and this might be difficult in a school setting, but try to provide room temperature food, nothing that's too hot or too cold. They prefer form-fitting clothing as opposed to loose clothing. And as mentioned above, heavy blankets for a safe spot. So if that child wants to, go and get some alone time, this could be a 2-for-1. Provide heavy blankets for a place that they can go and feel safe. How sensory processing disorder, or SPD, affects children with ASD, autism spectrum disorder. So these children have poor sensory input and an atypical threshold, and this little guide to the right here in this image that I input, if you take time to read it, it shows some signs of sensory processing disorder, also known as SPD, and they may have issue with foods. They may not want to be touched. touched or can't be touched enough. They may cover their ears when noises are too loud. They may not like their hair being brushed or cut. May be sensitive to light. May get upset or thrown off if the texture of their clothing is too tight or too loose, or tags. Tags is a big issue as well. Something as simple as buying tagless clothing or cutting tags out can help quite a bit. And they may have poor coordination or maybe an excessive risk taker. And I think if we stopped and thought about students that we have taught or that we have in the classroom, we might be able to identify quite a few kids, or maybe even something in ourselves that may fall along this chart here. So I found this to be interesting as well, and have even learned some things about myself, because I know myself, I don't like tags, and never have liked tags even as a child. So I found that to be pretty interesting, that that could be part of a sensory processing disorder. So now we're going to talk about some support strategies for those children, people that may suffer with a sensory processing disorder. So a support strategy or coping strategy may be to stick with favorite food flavors and textures. So these children may not be adventurous food eaters. They may have one or two things they like, mac and cheese or chicken nuggets or pizza. They won't want to branch out too much or even add condiments, just the plainer the better. Unscented markers and materials, we talked about that in the previous slide, as that may be a distraction if they are scented or maybe overwhelming. Use table lamps instead of overhead fluorescent lights, and I know in the gym where I teach, I do not put all of the lights on. I just put the walk-through lights on, because the overhead lights are very intense, and they also make that buzzing sound, which I know can distract many of my students. If you're in a classroom, I know they sell those almost like blinds or shades that you can put over your fluorescent lights, and I have known that to be helpful with students as well. Another strategy is to use firm pressure on the skin to calm. Provide earplugs or earbuds during work or in PE classroom, and I have a student that does wear earplugs in the PE classroom because the music is overwhelming, and so many sounds of the excitement can be overwhelming. Provide preferred surface textures. Maybe even give the individual a piece of Velcro to rub, or a ball that has different textures. Provide written or recorded instructions, and provide a space with heavy blankets and beanbag chairs. Another solution that I found to be interesting through my research is a sensory diet. I know many of us, our schools might have sensory rooms, where there's a place where the child can go to be alone and play with some kinetic sand, or use pressure machines, or sit in beanbag chairs, things that will help calm them. Another solution is a sensory diet, and this is something that we all could use as well. So enjoy this as you watch this video, and hopefully some of you would like to incorporate this in your everyday teaching. So hopefully, after watching that video, you can incorporate some of those things into your classroom, or in phys ed, I know I can definitely use those things. Maybe provide some recess activity using many of those techniques demonstrated. So I found that to be very interesting and an alternative to the sensory room. So, in conclusion, throughout this presentation, we've discussed what sensory processing is, what the disorders are, the seven senses, not the five senses, and patterns and strategies that can be used to help um, children with sensory processing disorder that is very common in children with autism and Asperger's syndrome. So, what I'd like you to experience next as this video is, what does it actually feel like to have a sensory disorder in the classroom? And this video is part of a series that you can access. It's called Autism Ontario, and I just chose the scenario of the classroom because I think most of my audience teaches in the classroom, and it's what a child goes through when they first enter your classroom and what they experience. It also has different scenes such as the gym, the hallway, the cafeteria that you can access on your own if you go to this website or if you Google Autism Ontario. But I hope that it provides you some insight and empathy for what it's like for that child in your classroom. So please enjoy. hope that you enjoyed that video. I know for me it was a real eye opener, and I watched some of the other scenarios as well. Um, the hallway and the gym, very eye opening as to what may seem normal noise to us or normal experiences, sensory experience, can be overwhelming and distracting and actually debilitating for our students that suffer with sensory disorders and sensory processing, and especially, again, those who are autistic, because they tend to be more prevalent to the sensory processing disorder. So I hope that you enjoyed my presentation. I enjoyed researching it and putting it together, and I look forward to receiving your 2 questions and answering them to the best of my knowledge. Thanks again, and on the next slide you will see my references. One thing I'd like to point out about the references is my last reference I used, Behavior Doctor Seminars. This was very helpful to me. I plan on sharing this out with my faculty as well during a faculty meeting. It gives you lots of support strategies for autism, ODD, sensory disorders. Many of the